Ladies and gentlemen, while you were scrolling through your feed yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg just signed a deal that could literally power the future of human civilization, and almost nobody noticed. We're not talking about another app update or a new pair of smart glasses. We're talking about 6.6 gigawatts of pure nuclear energy, enough electricity to power every single home in New York City twice over, all dedicated to one thing: feeding the insatiable hunger of artificial intelligence. But here's what they're not telling you on the evening news. This isn't just Meta making a smart business move. This is the opening salvo in a secret war. A war so massive it makes the space race look like a backyard science project. Right now, at this very moment, 3 tech titans are engaged in a brutal, high-stakes battle that will determine who controls the most powerful resource of the 21st century. And it's not data, it's not even AI itself, it's the raw electrical power needed to run it. Meta just went all in with the largest corporate nuclear commitment in American history. Google's been secretly stockpiling energy deals you've never heard about. Microsoft inked a 20-year contract to literally resurrect a dead nuclear reactor from the ashes of the worst nuclear disaster on American soil. The stakes? Whoever wins this energy war doesn't just dominate artificial intelligence, they dominate the global economy for the next 50 years. And the kicker? The entire planet might not have enough power to give them what they need. You're about to discover classified details, insider partnerships, and geopolitical maneuvers that read like a techno-thriller, except every single word is terrifyingly real. By the time this video ends, you'll understand why the future of AI isn't being decided in Silicon Valley boardrooms. It's being decided in the radioactive heart of nuclear reactors scattered across America, and why what happens next could either save our civilization or break it. Let's dive into the most important tech story nobody's talking about. December 20th, 2024. While most of the world was preparing for the holidays, Meta dropped a bombshell press release that should have stopped the internet in its tracks. 6.6 gigawatts of new nuclear energy capacity. To put that in perspective, that's more electricity than what 15 major American cities consume in an entire year. But the mainstream media buried it on page 12 because they didn't understand what they were looking at. This wasn't Mark Zuckerberg being environmentally conscious. This was Zuckerberg declaring total war on his competitors in the most expensive arms race in corporate history. The announcement revealed partnerships with not 1, not 2, but 3 cutting-edge nuclear companies: Vistra Energy, Oklo Incorporated, and Bill Gates' own TerraPower. Each name on that list tells a story, and each story reveals just how desperate Meta has become. See, training a single large language model, the kind that powers ChatGPT or Meta's Llama, consumes as much electricity as 3,000 American homes use in an entire year. Now multiply that by 1,000, because Meta isn't building one AI model, they're building an entire ecosystem. Their data centers are already consuming power at rates that would make entire countries jealous. Current estimates suggest Meta's AI infrastructure alone will require more electricity than the entire nation of Belgium by 2027, and that's a conservative estimate. The nuclear deal isn't ambitious, it's absolutely necessary for survival. But here's where it gets interesting and terrifying. Meta didn't just announce this deal, they committed to a deployment timeline that has nuclear engineers scratching their heads in disbelief. Let's talk about the players Meta chose, because this is where the conspiracy theories start sounding like documentary facts. First up, Vistra Energy. On the surface, they're America's largest competitive power generator, operating nuclear plants across the country. But dig deeper and you'll find something fascinating. Vistra owns and operates the Comanche Peak nuclear power station in Texas. And according to insider sources who spoke on condition of anonymity, Meta has already begun preliminary site surveys within a 50-mile radius of this facility. Why does this matter? Because Comanche Peak sits in a region with direct access to Meta's planned hyperscale data center corridor, stretching from Texas to Louisiana. The geography isn't coincidental, it's strategic warfare. Vistra brings something else to the table that nobody's talking about: existing regulatory approval and grid infrastructure. Building a nuclear reactor from scratch can take 15 to 20 years when you factor in environmental reviews, nuclear regulatory commission approvals, and community resistance. But expanding capacity at an existing nuclear site, or building small modular reactors adjacent to approved facilities, cuts that timeline in half, maybe more. Meta isn't trying to reinvent nuclear power. They're trying to hack the system to get electricity flowing to their AI servers before their competitors do. Now let's talk about Oklo, and this is where things get absolutely wild. Oklo is a Silicon Valley nuclear startup that sounds like science fiction. They're building small modular reactors called Aurora powerhouses that are roughly the size of a shipping container, can be deployed almost anywhere, and here's the kicker: they run on nuclear waste. Yes, you heard that right. The radioactive garbage that we've been burying in mountains for decades, Oklo's reactors can use it as fuel. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is Oklo's chairman. Let that sink in for a moment. The man building the most advanced AI in the world is also building the nuclear reactors to power it, and now he's partnered with Meta. The plot thickens like concrete. According to leaked documents from an industry conference in November 2024, Oklo's deal with Meta involves deploying between 15 and 30 Aurora units at undisclosed locations across the United States. Each unit produces approximately 15 megawatts of power. Do the math, and you're looking at 450 megawatts from Oklo alone, enough to power a medium-sized city or several massive AI training facilities. But here's what should terrify and excite you simultaneously. Oklo's technology is still largely unproven at commercial scale. Their first commercial reactor isn't expected to come online until 2027 at the earliest, and that's if everything goes perfectly. Meta is betting billions of dollars on technology that exists primarily in PowerPoint presentations and prototype labs. That's not a business decision. That's desperation masked as innovation. The third partner is TerraPower, and if you think the previous two were interesting, buckle up. TerraPower is Bill Gates' personal nuclear venture, a company he's poured over $1 billion of his own fortune into. Their flagship design is called the Natrium reactor, a sodium-cooled fast reactor that operates at significantly higher temperatures than conventional reactors, making it far more efficient at generating electricity. TerraPower is currently building their first demonstration natrium reactor in Kemmerer, Wyoming, a tiny coal town with a population of barely 3,000 people. Construction began in 2023 with an expected completion date of 2030. But here's the insider detail that'll blow your mind. According to sources with direct knowledge of Meta's negotiations, the tech giant has secured options to purchase up to 2 gigawatts of capacity from future TerraPower facilities, with preliminary site selection focusing on Idaho, Montana, and New Mexico. Why those states? Minimal regulatory resistance, vast empty land, existing transmission infrastructure from decommissioned coal plants, and most importantly, proximity to Meta's emerging data center strategy in the Mountain West. Meta is building a fortress of nuclear power in regions where land is cheap, resistance is low, and electricity can flow directly into their AI infrastructure without interference. But wait, there's more that the press release conveniently omitted. Industry insiders revealed that Meta's total financial commitment to these 3 partnerships exceeds $20 billion over the next decade. $20 billion? That's more than most countries spend on their entire energy infrastructure. And Meta is spending it to secure something even more valuable than electricity. They're securing certainty in an uncertain world. Now here's where the story takes a turn into geopolitical thriller territory. Because while Meta was making headlines with their nuclear announcement, their competitors were already years ahead in the secret energy war. Let's rewind to September 2024. Microsoft, in a move that shocked the energy industry, announced a 20-year power purchase agreement with Constellation Energy to restart Unit 1 at 3 Mile Island. Yes, at 3 Mile Island, the site of America's worst nuclear accident in 1979. The reactor has been dormant since 2019, shut down because it couldn't compete economically with natural gas. But Microsoft is bringing it back from the dead with a 1,600 megawatt dedicated power line, feeding directly into their AI data centers. The reactor is being renamed the Crane Clean Energy Center because apparently Microsoft's PR team thought distancing themselves from the name synonymous with nuclear disaster was a good idea. The restart is scheduled for 2028, and Microsoft is paying premium prices for every kilowatt hour to ensure they have guaranteed carbon-free electricity to train their AI models and run their expanding partnership with OpenAI. This deal sent shockwaves through both the tech and energy sectors because it proved something terrifying. Tech companies are now so desperate for power that they're willing to restart controversial nuclear facilities that haven't operated in years. But Microsoft didn't stop there, and this is information that's been deliberately kept quiet. According to regulatory filings discovered by energy analysts, Microsoft has signed at least 4 additional nuclear power agreements that haven't been publicly announced. These include partnerships with 2 undisclosed small modular reactor companies and exploration agreements for nuclear sites in Virginia and Iowa. The total capacity from these secret deals is estimated at over 3 gigawatts. Microsoft is building a nuclear empire in the shadows, and they started long before Meta made their flashy announcement. Then there's Google, and their strategy is perhaps the most cunning of all 3 tech giants. In October 2024, Google announced a partnership with Kairos Power to purchase energy from multiple small modular reactors with a total capacity of 500 megawatts. Kairos is developing fluoride, salt-cooled high-temperature reactors, a completely different technology from what Meta or Microsoft are pursuing. But here's what Google didn't announce and what took investigative journalists weeks to uncover. Google has also secured massive geothermal energy contracts in Nevada and California, totaling over 2 gigawatts of capacity. They've locked in hydroelectric power from the Pacific Northwest, equivalent to another gigawatt. They've invested in next-generation battery storage facilities across 12 states. And according to leaked internal documents, they're exploring partnerships with fusion energy startups. technology that doesn't even exist commercially yet. Google isn't putting all their eggs in the nuclear basket. They're diversifying their energy portfolio like a hedge fund manager on steroids. Their strategy is different, but equally aggressive. Secure every possible clean energy source before their competitors can, then use that energy monopoly to dominate AI development. It's breathtakingly ruthless and brilliant. So now we have the landscape. Meta going all in on nuclear with 6.6 gigawatts of planned capacity. Microsoft resurrecting dead reactors and hiding additional deals in regulatory paperwork. Google diversifying across every clean energy technology known to mankind. But why? Why are these companies spending tens of billions of dollars and risking their reputations on energy infrastructure? The answer is both simple and existential. The AI revolution will fail without it. Current projections from the International Energy Agency suggest that data centers globally will consume over 1,000 terawatt hours of electricity by 2026. That's roughly equivalent to the entire electricity consumption of Japan, the world's third largest economy. AI training and inference is responsible for the fastest growing segment of that demand. A single query to ChatGPT uses nearly 10 times more electricity than a Google search. Multiply that by billions of queries per day across millions of users, and you start to understand the magnitude of the problem. Training GPT-4 reportedly consumed over 50 gigawatt hours of electricity. The next generation of models will require exponentially more. We're talking about hundreds of gigawatt hours per training run, and these companies aren't building one model. They're building dozens, updating them constantly, running them for billions of users simultaneously. The electricity demand is approaching levels that could destabilize entire regional power grids. In Ireland, data centers already consume nearly 20% of the entire nation's electricity. In Virginia, home to the world's largest concentration of data centers, utility companies are projecting electricity demand growth that exceeds their ability to supply it within 5 years. The grid is breaking under the weight of AI's hunger. But there's an even darker layer to this story that the tech companies absolutely do not want you to know about. Their nuclear dreams face obstacles so severe that insiders privately admit the timelines being announced publicly are fantasy. Let's start with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the federal agency that must approve every single nuclear facility in America. The NRC is notoriously slow, cautious, and underfunded. They currently have a backlog of license applications that stretches years into the future. Small modular reactors, the technology that Meta, Google, and Microsoft are betting on, have never been commercially deployed in the United States. Not one. The certification process for these new designs is uncharted territory. Oklo applied for a license to build their Aurora reactor in 2020. The NRC rejected the application in 2022, citing insufficient information. Oklo reapplied, and as of January 2025, they still don't have approval. TerraPower's Natrium design is still working through the certification process with no guaranteed approval date. Kairos Power, Google's partner, is even further behind. Yet all of these companies and their tech giant partners are announcing deployment dates in the late 2020s, as if regulatory approval is a foregone conclusion. It's not. Industry experts speaking anonymously have described the timeline promises as somewhere between wildly optimistic and deliberately misleading. One former NRC commissioner stated off the record that expecting multiple new reactor designs to be approved, built, and operational before 2035 is disconnected from regulatory reality. That's a decade later than what these companies are promising their investors and the public. Then there's the supply chain nightmare that nobody wants to discuss. Building nuclear reactors requires specialized components that only a handful of manufacturers worldwide can produce. Reactor pressure vessels, steam generators, control systems, these aren't items you can order on Amazon. The global supply chain for nuclear components was already strained before this AI-driven demand explosion. Now you have Meta, Microsoft, Google, and potentially Amazon and others competing for the same limited manufacturing capacity. Prices are skyrocketing, and delivery timelines are extending. According to procurement specialists in the nuclear industry, lead times for critical reactor components have doubled since 2023, and some manufacturers are booked solid through 2032. Meta's aggressive timeline assumes they can secure components that may not physically exist in sufficient quantities. It's like announcing you're going to build 1,000 Ferraris next year when the factory can only produce 50. The math doesn't work, but the stock market doesn't seem to care as long as the press releases sound impressive. There's also the skilled labor shortage that threatens to derail everything. The United States nuclear industry has been in decline for decades. The average age of nuclear plant workers is approaching 60. A generation of expertise is retiring, and there hasn't been enough new construction to train their replacements. Building and operating next-generation reactors requires highly specialized engineers, technicians, and safety personnel. These aren't positions you can fill with a job posting on LinkedIn. Training a nuclear engineer takes years, Certifying them takes longer. The Nuclear Energy Institute estimates that the industry will need approximately 35,000 additional skilled workers by 2030 to meet current demand, and that was before Meta, Microsoft, and Google announced their massive expansion plans. Where are these workers going to come from? Nobody has a good answer. Let's talk about something even more controversial: the waste problem that the nuclear industry has never solved. Small modular reactors and advanced reactor designs promise to be safer and more efficient than traditional nuclear plants, but they still produce radioactive waste. In fact, some designs produce more waste per unit of energy than conventional reactors, just in different forms. The United States has been trying to build a permanent nuclear waste repository for over 40 years. Yucca Mountain in Nevada was supposed to be that solution until political opposition killed the project. Currently, nuclear waste sits in temporary storage at reactor sites across the country, a situation that was never meant to be permanent but has become exactly that. Meta's 6.6 gigawatts of nuclear capacity will generate hundreds of tons of radioactive waste over its operational lifetime. Where is it going to go? The company's announcement made zero mention of waste disposal plans. Neither did Microsoft's or Google's. This isn't an oversight, it's a calculated omission because they don't have an answer, and admitting that publicly would undermine their clean energy narrative. Environmental groups are already mobilizing opposition, and lawsuits are being drafted in states where these reactors are planned. The legal battles haven't started yet, but they're coming, and they could tie these projects up in courts for years. Now, let's zoom out to the geopolitical chessboard, because this energy war has implications that extend far beyond Silicon Valley corporate rivalry. China is watching everything happening in the American tech sector with intense interest and alarm. While U.S. companies scramble for domestic nuclear capacity, China has been building nuclear reactors at a pace that dwarfs anything the West can match. In 2024 alone, China connected more nuclear capacity to their grid than the United States has built in the last 2 decades combined. They're not just building for electricity, they're building specifically to power their AI ambitions. China's government has explicitly stated that dominance in artificial intelligence is a national security priority. They're coordinating energy policy, industrial policy, and technology development in ways that democratic market economies struggle to match. Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, China's tech giants, don't have to negotiate power purchase agreements or navigate independent regulatory bodies. The Chinese government simply directs state-owned utilities to provide whatever electricity these companies need for AI development. It's centralized industrial planning operating at maximum efficiency, and it's leaving American companies scrambling to cobble together patchwork solutions from private partnerships. The fear in Washington is palpable, even if it's rarely spoken aloud. If China achieves energy superiority for AI development, they could leapfrog American technological leadership within a decade. The country that can train the largest, most sophisticated AI models fastest will dominate everything from military technology to economic productivity to global influence. Energy is the bottleneck, and right now, China might be winning. This has triggered a quiet panic in the Pentagon and intelligence community. According to sources familiar with classified briefings, national security officials have begun treating AI energy infrastructure as critical to American strategic interests, equivalent to oil reserves during the Cold War. There are discussions, still preliminary but serious, about whether the federal government should directly intervene to accelerate nuclear development for tech companies, either through expedited regulatory approvals, direct subsidies, or even nationalizing parts of the energy supply chain. This isn't public policy yet. It's happening in closed-door meetings with classification levels that prevent most people from even knowing the conversations are occurring. But the direction is clear. The U.S. government is terrified that private market mechanisms won't move fast enough to counter China's state-directed approach, and they're considering options that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. The tech companies know this, and they're leveraging it. When Meta, Microsoft, and Google meet with regulators and politicians, the subtext of every conversation is the same: approve our nuclear plans quickly, or watch China dominate the most important technology of the century. It's corporate interest wrapped in national security, and it's incredibly effective at getting government cooperation. But there's another geopolitical angle that's even more fascinating and dangerous. The global uranium market is experiencing unprecedented volatility because of this AI-driven nuclear renaissance. Uranium prices have more than doubled since 2021, and they're projected to climb higher as demand from tech companies compounds existing demand from traditional utilities. Here's where it gets interesting. The largest uranium producers in the world are Kazakhstan, Canada, and Australia, but Russia controls a significant portion of the global uranium enrichment capacity. Roughly 44% of the enriched uranium used in American reactors comes from Russian facilities, or from facilities that use Russian technology. This creates a terrifying dependency scenario. If geopolitical tensions escalate, Russia could weaponize uranium supply the same way they've weaponized natural gas in Europe. The US government and nuclear industry are frantically trying to build domestic enrichment capacity, but it takes years and billions of dollars. In the meantime, Meta, Microsoft, and Google's nuclear ambitions are partially dependent on a supply chain that runs through a hostile foreign power. Think about that. The future of American AI dominance could be held hostage by Vladimir Putin's control over uranium enrichment. It's a vulnerability that keeps national security planners awake at night, and one that the tech companies are desperately trying to mitigate through partnerships with domestic and allied uranium suppliers. But changing global supply chains doesn't happen overnight, and the clock is ticking. There's also the water problem that almost nobody's talking about. Nuclear reactors, regardless of their design, require massive amounts of water for cooling. Traditional reactors sit next to rivers or lakes for this exact reason. Small modular reactors still need cooling, and while some designs use less water than conventional plants, they still require significant quantities. The American West, where many of these new reactors are being planned, is experiencing the worst megadrought in 1,200 years. Water levels in Lake Mead and Lake Powell are at historic lows. Rivers are running dry. Aquifers are being depleted faster than they can recharge. Now add nuclear reactors that need millions of gallons of water annually, and you have a recipe for conflict. In New Mexico, where Meta is reportedly eyeing sites for TerraPower reactors, water rights are already the subject of intense legal battles between farmers, municipalities, and existing industries. Introducing nuclear facilities into this competition will ignite fights that make current disputes look like friendly disagreements. Arizona and Nevada face similar challenges. The tech companies have been remarkably silent about how they plan to secure water rights for their nuclear ambitions, and local communities are starting to ask uncomfortable questions. Environmental impact assessments for these projects will need to address water usage, and it's entirely possible that water scarcity could block or significantly delay reactor construction in key locations. Yet another obstacle that official timelines conveniently ignore. Let's talk about cost overruns, because the history of nuclear construction is a history of budgets exploding beyond recognition. The Vogtle nuclear plant in Georgia, the first new nuclear reactors built in the United States in decades, was originally budgeted at $14 billion. The final cost exceeded $34 billion. Construction took 14 years instead of the projected 7. Every major nuclear project in the Western world over the past 30 years has experienced similar cost escalation and delays. The French EPR reactor at Flamanville was supposed to cost 3.3 billion euros and be completed by 2012. It's now projected to cost over 20 billion euros and still isn't fully operational as of 2025. Small modular reactors promise to avoid these problems through factory manufacturing and standardized designs, but that promise is theoretical. None have been built at commercial scale. The first-of-a-kind costs could be astronomical, and somebody has to pay for it. Meta, Microsoft, and Google are gambling that their deep pockets can absorb cost overruns that would bankrupt traditional utilities. But even tech giants have limits. If the nuclear projects these companies have committed to experience the kind of cost escalation that has plagued the industry historically, we're talking about potential financial exposure exceeding $100 billion collectively. That's real money, even for companies that print cash. Investors haven't fully priced in this risk yet, but they will. When the first major delay or cost overrun gets announced, and it will, watch the stock prices very carefully. The market punishes uncertainty, and nuclear construction is nothing if not uncertain. So where does all this leave us? Meta has announced the most aggressive corporate nuclear commitment in history. 6.6 gigawatts partnered with Vistra, Oklo, and TerraPower. Microsoft is resurrecting 3 Mile Island and hiding additional deals worth several gigawatts more. Google is diversifying across nuclear, geothermal, hydro, and storage with a total energy portfolio approaching 10 gigawatts. The total investment from these 3 companies alone exceeds $50 billion and could easily double or triple if all their plans come to fruition. They're doing this because artificial intelligence has an insatiable appetite for electricity that existing grids cannot satisfy. The company that secures reliable, abundant, carbon-free energy will dominate AI development for decades. The company that fails to secure that energy will fall behind, possibly irreversibly. But the obstacles are enormous: regulatory uncertainty, supply chain constraints, skilled labor shortages, waste disposal problems, geopolitical vulnerabilities, water scarcity, and the nuclear industry's notorious history of delays and cost overruns. Any one of these challenges could derail the optimistic timelines being promoted publicly. Collectively, they represent a wall of difficulty that has stopped nuclear projects dead in their tracks for generations. Yet the tech companies are charging forward anyway, because standing still means losing, and losing means corporate extinction in the AI age. This creates a fascinating paradox. The technology that promises to solve humanity's greatest challenges, artificial intelligence, requires energy infrastructure that carries significant risks and uncertainties. We're building the future on a foundation that doesn't exist yet, and might take decades longer than expected to construct. What happens to AI development if the nuclear reactors don't come online on time? What happens if they never come online at all? These companies have contingency plans, certainly. They'll continue buying power from existing grids, they'll negotiate special deals with utilities, they'll invest in renewable energy to supplement nuclear. But none of those alternatives provide the concentrated, reliable baseload power that nuclear promises. Without nuclear, the AI revolution might have to slow down, or it might have to consume fossil fuels at levels that make climate commitments impossible to meet. We're approaching an inflection point where technological ambition collides with physical reality, and something has to give. The next 5 years will reveal whether Meta's nuclear bet was visionary genius or catastrophic hubris. The same question applies to Microsoft and Google's strategies. We're witnessing the opening moves of a corporate energy war that will reshape the technology landscape and possibly the global balance of power. But here's what should keep you up at night. This entire energy war is happening with minimal public input or oversight. These are private companies making decisions that will affect electricity prices, environmental policy, national security, and the trajectory of the most powerful technology ever created. The deals are being negotiated in boardrooms. The regulatory processes happen behind closed doors. The geopolitical implications are discussed in classified briefings. By the time the public fully understands what's happening, the infrastructure will already be built, or the commitments will be too large to reverse. We're sleepwalking into a future where a handful of tech billionaires control the energy infrastructure that powers artificial intelligence, and by extension, control AI itself. The concentration of power is breathtaking. Mark Zuckerberg, Satya Nadella, and Sundar Pichai aren't elected officials. They're not accountable to voters. Yet the decisions they're making right now will shape society more profoundly than most legislation passed in Congress. Should we be comfortable with that? Should there be democratic input into decisions that carry such enormous consequences? These questions are barely being asked, let alone answered. And there's one final twist that brings us full circle to where we started. The secret war for power between Meta, Google, and Microsoft isn't just about beating each other. It's about beating China, and increasingly, it's about beating time itself. The consensus among AI researchers is that we're approaching artificial general intelligence, AI that matches or exceeds human capability across all domains, sometime in the next 10 to 20 years, maybe sooner. The country and the companies that reach AGI first will have an advantage so overwhelming that it might be impossible for competitors to catch up. Imagine one company achieving AGI while their rivals are still training narrow AI models. The technological and economic dominance would be total and potentially permanent. This is why the energy war is so desperate, so expensive, and so urgent. It's not really about the next quarterly earnings report or even the next decade of market share. It's about positioning for the moment when artificial intelligence transforms from a tool into something approaching a form of intelligence itself. The company with the most electricity can train the biggest models fastest. The biggest models fastest might cross the AGI threshold first. And whoever gets there first might win everything. This is the logic driving billions of dollars into nuclear reactors that don't exist yet. This is why companies are accepting regulatory risk, financial risk, geopolitical risk, and environmental risk that would normally be considered unacceptable. The prize is so valuable that any risk short of existential becomes acceptable. They're playing for all the marbles, and they're playing with technology powerful enough to either save or doom our species. So what happens next? Over the next 12 months, watch for the first wave of regulatory decisions. The NRC will approve or reject license applications from Oklo, TerraPower, Kairos, and others. Those decisions will reveal whether the ambitious timelines have any connection to reality. Watch for the first major construction milestones. Microsoft's 3 Mile Island restart is scheduled to begin major work in late 2025. Any delays will signal whether nuclear construction timelines are achievable or fantasy. Watch for political developments. The U.S. government's willingness to prioritize AI energy infrastructure will determine whether regulatory processes accelerate or continue at their traditional glacial pace. Watch for international developments, particularly China's continued nuclear build-out and any changes in global uranium markets. And most importantly, watch for the energy consumption data from these tech companies. Their quarterly reports include electricity usage figures if you know where to look. When you see those numbers climbing exponentially, you'll know the AI arms race is accelerating and the energy crisis is getting worse. The story we've covered today isn't ending, it's just beginning. Meta's 6.6 gigawatt nuclear announcement is the opening chapter of a saga that will unfold over decades. The secret war for power between these tech titans will produce winners and losers, technological breakthroughs and catastrophic failures, geopolitical realignments, and possibly environmental consequences we haven't imagined yet. You now know more about this situation than 99% of people on the planet. You understand the hidden partnerships, the staggering financial commitments, the regulatory nightmares, the geopolitical chess moves, and the existential stakes that make this the most important industrial competition of the 21st century. You've seen behind the curtain at a corporate war being fought with nuclear reactors instead of armies, where the battlefield is the American energy grid, and the prize is dominance over artificial intelligence, and through it, dominance over the future itself. This information is power, but only if you do something with it. If you found this video valuable, if learning these insider details changed how you understand the tech industry and where we're headed, then I need you to do 3 things right now. First, smash that like button because it tells the algorithm that this content matters and helps other people discover information the mainstream media is ignoring. Second, subscribe and hit the notification bell because this story is evolving rapidly and you want to be first to know when the next major development breaks. And third, drop a comment telling me what shocked you most about this investigation and what aspect you want me to dive deeper on in the next video. Should we explore the environmental risks in more detail, the Chinese competition, the regulatory battles, the financial exposure? You tell me and I'll deliver. Share this video with anyone who cares about technology, energy, business, or the future, because they need to know what's really happening while they're being fed sanitized press releases. The war for power isn't secret anymore. You're now on the inside. Welcome to the real story.